Welcome everybody that is here, and welcome to the Topics USA Debate Workshop. We are very pleased to have everyone here today from various clubs, and we look forward to seeing other people join us in as we go along. And we are very honored to have William Hagerup. And William, I should have asked you long before now, but how do you pronounce your name?
How do I pronounce it?
Yes.
Well, I pronounce it Hagerup, but that's because I'm Norwegian.
Hagerup.
So
okay.
you can pronounce it any which way you like.
Okay. Hagerup. Okay. William Hagerup of London Debaters. He is here to lead our workshop today. At Topics USA, Toastmasters, and now Topics USA Debate, we focus on national and civic issues, controversial and divisive issues. And when you step into that heavy topics arena, we quickly learn that communication skills are not enough, at least in the modern Pathways Toastmasters sense. We also need argumentation skills. And Toastmasters is a wonderful place to help us develop clarity, structure, vocal variety, and confidence. But debate adds something different and deeply valuable. Debate teaches us how to construct a position logically, how to anticipate objections, how to listen carefully to opposing arguments, and how to respond without becoming defensive. In today's environment, where public discourse can be polarizing, emotional, and sometimes hostile, the ability to disagree well is not just a speaking skill, it's a civic skill. We live at a time where many people retreat into like-minded circles. Algorithms feed us views we already agree with. Conversations shut down quickly, and disagreements often are treated as disrespectful. Debate, when done well, models something better. It models structured disagreement. It models intellectual humility. It models the idea that two intelligent people can look at the same evidence and draw different conclusions without becoming enemies. That is enormously valuable, and that is why we believe debate belongs in Toastmasters. Not to turn our meetings into combative arenas, but to strengthen our thinking. When we prepare for a debate, we are forced to examine both sides. We're forced to clarify definitions. We're forced to find evidence for assertions. The goal here today may be to learn how to win arguments, but it is also to sharpen our reasoning, to improve our listening, and to practice civil, structured engagement. If we leave here today better equipped to do those things, we will have succeeded. And with that, I'm delighted to introduce our real host here today, William Hagerup, who brings both competitive debate experience and Toastmasters experience, and who will guide us through our workshop today. William.
Thank you very much, Doug, for that wonderful introduction, highlighting so many of the important aspects of debating. And thank you all for coming along to this workshop. And I hope we shall learn at least something today. So, yes, I'm William. I started out as a youth politician when I was 16 back in Norway, where I grew up, and moved to England in 1997. Yes, that's how old I am. I actually moved here back then. I had a few years when I didn't really do much debating, but during lockdown, I joined 104 London debaters, of which we have a few members here present at the moment. And my love of debating was reignited, and since then I've made it a bit of a study and hobby of mine, and that resulted in writing all the stuff that I've learned, at least most of it, the good bits, in a book called The Really Practical Guide to Debate: How to Win Every Argument That You Don't Lose. And the point with that subtitle is that sometimes you will be wrong. So you're not supposed to win every time. And the point is actually to have an honest mind, an honest attitude, and an honest critical approach, both to your own thinking and to other people's thinking, and be prepared to sometimes be proven wrong. Because you know what? It's better to be proven wrong than to continue to be wrong. Wouldn't you agree? At least I think so. So without saying much more than that, because we have a fair bit of material to cover, I think I'm going to launch into the presentation. So we're going to look at how to build a strong argument, and there are so many ways in which you can do that. There are many aspects to it. I'm just going to focus on some aspects that I have found very helpful for me to become better at putting my argument across as best I can. This will be relevant for proposition and opposition sides. Some of it will be relevant for both sides, and then some points will be more relevant for one or the other. I think let's start first of all with hearing from you guys. What do you, if you want to just unmute yourself for a moment and just tell me what you think a strong argument is. No right or wrong answers here. I'm just wanting to gauge sort of how you feel about it. What would you say is a strong argument?
I think whatever. Sorry, Arya here. I think whatever argument you submit, I think structure is important.
A well-structured argument. Okay, yeah, great point. Anyone else?
One that connects with the intended receiver, that has, whether it's logic or emotion or structure, it's a strong argument that is designed to persuade a particular person or group of people based on their reality. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, absolutely. You basically, we can all go home now. That's it, actually. I see some hands up. If you want to just shout it out, unmute and shout it out for the next few seconds, that's fine. No need to be Zoom polite.
Shout it out. Shall I shout it out?
Please shout, Ali.
Okay, so I think it needs to be both honest and curious. Mm-hmm. Honest in terms of actually saying what you feel or think is true, and curious in terms of wanting to know what the audience feels or thinks, and wanting to also know what you think or feel. Mm-hmm. So I think it does need to have those two qualities.
Mm-hmm. That's a very interesting point. Dwight, did you want to say something?
Sure. I think it's based on good organization of your thoughts, and then also recognizing different perspectives that people can have and respect each perspective.
Well, thank you all for those various thoughts. And I think you all touched on things that certainly are all part of what makes up a strong argument. I want to take just one step back, and I want to ask, first of all, what is an argument? Let's start with that. Now, there's a guy called Anthony Weston in a book recommended by the founder and president of our club, one of our London debaters, called A Rule Book for Arguments. And he defines an argument as reasons put forward in support of a conclusion. So when you have a conclusion, you need to support it with reasons, right? And basically what an argument is that whole package of reasons. We can call it grounds, we can call it premises. Essentially, it's reasons for why you should support that conclusion. And the stronger, of course, these pillars are, the stronger the argument is. So they are efforts to support certain views with reasons. The stronger the reasons, the stronger is the argument. Now, if you just make assertions, which some people do, and we talked about it before the session, there are some people who just don't want to change their mind. They just want to assert their views, and that's it, and they don't want to listen. Okay, fine. So you can't have a debate on that basis. You have to put forward reasons and be ready to explore how strong and how well they support the conclusion. Now, before we get into the nitty-gritty of the strong argument, I wanted to talk about Aristotle's 3 modes of persuasion, because it all fits into that. Now, you may have heard of these. Aristotle, of course, a Greek philosopher 2,500 years ago. This is not him, by the way. This is Churchill. But he was very good at using these 3 modes. So the first one is logos. That's a Greek word, which means words. Literally, it means words. It's where we have the word logic from, because it also means thoughts. So you need words. You also need, though, as part of the whole package, and these are not separate things. These must be, imagine a bread dough. You know, this is the flour, the sugar, the water, and you mix it all together. And the ethos, which is the word from which we have ethics. So it's got to do with values, but in the context of debating, it's to do with how credible you are. It's about how you connect with the audience in terms of the values. And then finally, pathos or pathos in Greek. This is from where we have the word pathology, by the way. But in this case, it's really to do with how you connect to people emotionally, essentially by the use of examples. That's mainly how we do it. There are also other ways, like which words you use. You can use different words to get different emotional reactions. But essentially, for the most part, what you want to do with this mode of persuasion is to make the abstract point really vivid. Now, we're going to talk more about each of these. So let's first say, what is the structure of a strong argument? We talked about structure earlier. So yes, it has got a structure. Now, let's say you come to your boss and you say, I should be paid a higher salary. Okay, so that's the conclusion you have reached. That's the motion, if you like. Your boss says, why? Okay, and that's when you need to support your conclusion with reasons. Now, if you just say, because I need more money, your boss will say, well, so what? I don't care, go away. I mean, if he's a very, very nice boss, he may say, tell me more. But, you know, he's looking after the interest of the taxpayer, not taxpayers. Well, it might be if it's in the public sector, but of the shareholders or whatever. So he's not going to give you more money just because you think you need more money. So you need some stronger arguments than that. Okay, so let's try and structure it a bit better. So it was mentioned earlier, something about truth value. And a strong argument, I think, needs to have 3 elements. And the first one is that it needs to have truth value. Now, when I say that, I mean both factually true, that you can prove it and demonstrate it, but also true in the sense that it rings true with the people you're talking to, right? You know, I don't want to bring it all the way to it's true for me, but not for you. I mean, I don't quite like that way of talking. But when it comes to values, sometimes it will ring true for one person, but not for another person because of values. So it needs to ring true for people. Now, so you may want to start with something that everybody can, or at least most people can agree with. So in this case, people who contribute similar value should have similar reward. You know, that most people would agree with that. That's a pretty reasonable thing to say. And then you bring in something factual that you can demonstrate with your track record. I'm, you know, contributing at least as much as my colleagues who are paid more than me. How you discovered that, I don't know, but we'll just go with that for the moment. Now, the problem here is that the warrant is still very weak. Now, remember this word. If you haven't heard it before, I'll be mentioning it quite a lot tonight, so don't worry. You'll be truly well versed in what it means. But look at what's happening here with this argument. So you are saying your colleagues are paid up here, you are paid down here, and you're saying people who contribute the same should be paid the same. Okay, so now your boss says, that's really true. I totally agree with you. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to reduce the pay of your colleagues so that you are now equal. Okay, because this argument warrants as much a reduction as an increase. Okay, so you need something else to really connect to the conclusion you want your employer to agree with, which is that not that you should be paid the same, but that you should be paid more. So you need something that's relevant for that particular claim. So now you bring out the policy of the company. This company has said, it says on its website that it wants to retain and reward hardworking, high-value employees. And I'm one of those. I'm one of those. Okay, so yeah, so that's relevant for why certainly you should be paid as much as anybody else in the organization. But we're still not quite there. You need one more element, and that is the argument needs to be really important to your employer or to whomever you're trying to convince. And in this case, if you're a valuable employee and you would be likely to leave, and certainly those other people, if your boss were to reduce their pay, they would certainly be likely to leave, wouldn't they? So actually, you need to increase my salary. Otherwise, you're going to have big expenses with finding someone else, training them, and you would lose, my wonderful presence in this company. Obviously, this will only work if you have a job that isn't easily replaced with anybody off the street. But so essentially, you need a strong argument, is true, relevant, and important. But not just to anyone, to the people you are trying to convince. In this case, obviously, it was the employer. So let's summarize. A conclusion, a strong argument is a conclusion supported with reasons that are true, relevant, and important to the people that you are trying to persuade, right? So that they can connect with your argument. Now, there is a way to check whether your warrant, remember this word, is strong. And that is, you can use the if-then, the if-then structure. The way that works is that you sort of turn your argument upside down and you put your conclusion at the bottom. And then you go through all the reasons that you have identified. So in this case, if equal work deserves equal pay, and if I'm doing equal work to those paid better than me, and if the company wishes to reward and retain high-value employees, and if you don't increase my salary, I will quit, and if my leaving is detrimental to the company, then you should increase my salary. Now, the warrant is as strong as each step here is compelling. Okay, if each step compels you to go to the next, then you have a strong warrant. But let's say, for example, that a libertarian came up to you in a debate and said, look, if slavery is wrong, yes, we all agree that's absolutely horribly wrong, and if taxation equals slavery, then we should abolish taxation. That's a completely logical argument. But that second if, that taxation is as bad as slavery, most people would go, I'm not too sure about that. So that's one thing as a point I use in my book, which is that it's a quote actually that says, beware of an improbable truth. So even if something is true, if you have to spend half an hour first, or perhaps a week, convincing people that something is true before you can use it, then that's not valuable in most debates. You've got to start from something that most people will accept as true. So that's why the point that it needs to be true. And so the ifs here work if they are compelling to the people that you are talking to. And your warrant is as strong as each if is compelling, that you are compelled to agree with them. Now, that's what we've been talking about now is really the logos, okay? The content, the logical structure, the words themselves and what they mean. Let's now look at how ethos fits into that. So here's a doctor, all right? You trust doctors, don't you? Well, what if he told you this? I think if your doctor told you that you need to take up smoking, in case you don't, you would think that he was mad, right? And so ethos has to do with the credibility of the speaker. And for us as debaters, we tend to improve our credibility by quoting sources. We say there's studies from Harvard, Yale, Oxford, Cambridge, or we quote experts and we say, you know, this guy is an expert in this field and he has said such and such, and others, etc., etc. And we build the credibility of our message with that. But if we come out with some really wacky conclusion or some really far out claim, then the audience will not buy it, quite simply. So ethos has been explained as a combination of two things: the credibility of the speaker and the reasonableness of his message. Now, people actually understand this instinctively, because have you ever heard anybody say, well, as a businessman, I know that businesses must not be taxed too highly. Or as a single mother, I know that the situation for single mothers is very tough, blah, blah, blah. You know, where very often people will use this phrase as a ... whatever, fill in the blank, in order to improve their credibility with the listener, right? So they are saying, listen to me because I know what I'm talking about here, okay? As a whatever, as an immigrant, as a whatever, you know. So, and then sometimes you can use it in a way to lend credibility to something that you wouldn't be likely to support. So say, for example, if you're a very strongly believing Christian and you say, you know, I'm a evangelical Christian, I'm a lay minister, but I think you should support this motion that women should have access to abortion up to whatever limit. Now, what you're trying to do there is say, you know, this is unlikely. So you should really listen to me because the arguments are so good that even I, as someone who is not likely to support this, is supporting it. So now you must listen to me. So that's an attempt to bolster your credibility. But as debaters, as I said, mostly the way we bolster our credibility is to, you know, quote credible sources and then build a reasonable argument from that. Then we move on to pathos. Okay, so this is where you try to really connect with the audience on an emotional level. So the logos, you know, that's what you put forward, the logical structure, the content of your argument. But then what you do is that you find some really good examples that can make it vivid, not just theory, not just abstract points, but look, here's a human being. This is how this policy will affect this person. And you can do that for either side of the debate. You know, if you're in the proposition, you will say, look, you know, in this case, Mary, you know, and you can talk. And obviously what will strengthen it as well is if you say this is a typical example. There are, you know, 10,000, 20,000 people in a similar situation. This is a typical example, rather than cherry pick and bring some you know, wild case that isn't really typical. So you need to bring an example that's typical, but make it personal, make it something that people can understand what you're talking about. And the opposition can do the same. You know, they can say that actually, if we pass this, then look at what will happen to someone else. You know, and then that's part of what you do in preparation, in your research. You try and find examples for either side of the argument. So essentially, what pathos comes down to is to make the abstract concrete, make it vivid, make it come to life, and enable people to really relate to it. Now, one thing that is specific for the proposition side is that they have, you know, the burden of proof. And because they have that burden, we also give them the privilege of defining the motion. Now, obviously, there's a technical term in debating called squirreling, or also known as going off topic. So that's when you make your interpretation so madly sort of off the actual meaning just to make it easy for yourself, that it's completely unreasonable, and you don't want to do that. But let's look at how you can do it in a legitimate way without making it unreasonably easy for yourself, because that wouldn't be right. So in this case, for example, this house would legalize organ sale. Now, if you were to squirrel it, if you were to go off topic and make it too easy for yourself, you would say that, well, what we mean by that is that you can donate your kidney or whatever, and then or your organs, and when you die, but only when you die, and then money will be given to a charity. No, that's not what anybody thinks of when you say sale, right? So that would just be completely unreasonable. However, what you can think of are the following two questions. First of all, what must we argue for? So what can't we get away from here? Okay, that's the first thing you want to establish. So obviously there must be some sort of transactional thing happening here, right? Some money changing hands and organs changing bodies. That you must argue for. But the second question, what do we not need to argue? Okay, you don't need to argue for a complete free-for-all. From tomorrow, you can go on eBay and, sell your lungs to Elon Musk or some millionaire who wants to pay you lots of money. You don't need to argue for that. Okay, so you can narrow it down. And that's really important to do, because the more narrow and specific you make it, the better it is for you and for the proposition side. So, for example, you can say things like, well, what we want to do is to create a hub where people can register because they want to donate their kidney or whatever. And then people who want to buy it can also register, but it's completely anonymous. It's perhaps on some sort of lottery system, fixed prices, heavily regulated. Nobody will know. Nobody will, millionaires. Elon Musk will not be able to just pay $10 million to get a poor person's body part. He can only pay the fixed price. Nobody will know the name of anybody, something like that, and then you create this whole scenario that's very, very specific, because then it's much more difficult to oppose it. Now, what you also want to establish in that process is what we call the stasis. So you don't need to remember this word, but it basically means the standing still. So this is what you do not want to argue for, and it's often good to make that clear. You can, the proposition's opening speaker can say, ladies and gentlemen, this is the motion. Let me just make it clear what we're not arguing for tonight is X, Y, Z, and then this is what we are arguing for. Just to make that clear. And the opposition can also use that, by the way, to say that we agree with the proposition that we need more organs, for example. We just disagree with this particular solution, and I'll come back to that point when we talk about the opposition more specifically in a moment. Okay, so building a strong argument then, let's just summarize so far, and then we'll look a bit more specifically on what the opposition needs to have in mind. So a strong argument, we started obviously with saying what is a claim, what is an argument, a claim with reasons, and a strong argument is a claim with reasons that are true, relevant, and important to the people you are trying to persuade. Now, the proposition has the burden of proof, therefore, and so they get to define the motion, use the following points, have the following points in mind. First, find the stasis, what we not need to argue, then think about what we must argue for, so that we don't go off topic, but also what we do not need to argue for. And with that in mind, you can sort of shape a good specific interpretation and then narrow it down, because you don't want to give the opposition this target. You want to give them this little tiny target. That's better for the proposition. Now, let's look a bit more specifically then at the opposition. Now, remember, I said that a strong argument has to be true, relevant, and important. So I often find it useful when I'm in opposition that I start to think about those 3 points, and I start to ask myself, well, is it true? Can we question the truth value? And that includes whether will it ring true for people? or will it be factually true? You can use this also on the night during the debate. For example, if the proposition says, "Oh, according to many studies, blah blah blah," okay, then you can get up and say, "What many studies? They didn't tell us which universities these were from. They didn't tell us when they were done, by whom. So I don't think that's a proven point at all. That's completely up in the air." Okay, so then you can question how well the proposition actually demonstrated the truth value of their claim. But also, is it generally accepted, such as with the libertarian and his taxation is slavery claim? You can question that and say, really, do we actually believe in that? The second question then, of course, goes on the relevancy. Is it relevant? And that's to do with how strong is the warrant there. And I'll come back to an example in a minute. And then finally, of course, how important is the claim they are making? Is it really important enough to actually support the motion? And the key question there is, well, so what? What if it is true, what they're saying? And what if it's even relevant? Is it really important enough? So is it true? Is it relevant? Is it important? Now, I'm going to talk more about three approaches you can use to identify these elements. The first one I call the even if argument, which and the flipping of the warrant is the second one, and the third one is the alternative scheme. I've stolen all these from a very brilliant guy called Professor Jared Atchison, who has a brilliant talk on debating. And if anybody's interested, I can send you a link afterwards to that one. It's a lecture series, so you have to listen to it. But it's a really good one. There is also another approach which is very, very good to use for policy debates. However, because of time, I don't think I'm going to go into it in detail, but it's actually developed by a debate coach in another club here in London, a guy called Sean Dolan, Sean Dolan, and he gave me permission to talk about this in my book. So I do have a section on it in that, and it's called the petal approach. But I'm not going to expand too much on it now because of time. If I have time, I'll say something on it in a minute. But I just want to talk through these three approaches because I think they are very, very helpful. So first of all, the alternative scheme. So let's say the proposition is putting forward the motion this house would ration meat. Okay, and they say this is because we need to do it for health reasons, for environmental reasons, etc., etc. What you can do then, so there are many ways in which, of course, you can oppose this motion. But one way is by way of the alternative scheme. Now, remember, the proposition has to prove two things in a policy debate. First of all, that there is a problem. There really is a problem, guys, because, and then you give all the reasons why there is a problem. That's the first thing. And then the second thing is, and here's the solution to it. And then comes the reasons why you should vote for the motion. And what that does for the opposition, of course, is that it gives the opposition the possibility of either attacking the first one, that there is a problem, and say, actually, there isn't such a big problem. This isn't really a problem. It's not a problem that's big enough to justify doing something about it. But then secondly, they can say, well, even if there is a problem, actually, this is the wrong solution. This is a bad solution. And because there are much, much better solutions. And then, so you can agree, that's the stasis, you can agree that we should reduce our meat consumption, but there are better ways than rationing. Come on, guys, and then you present that. Now, one important thing with the alternative scheme is that you must make sure that the proposition cannot do something called permutation. No need to remember that funny word. Essentially, just remember this. If we can do both, it ain't an alternative. Okay? If we can do both, it ain't an alternative. So, for example, if the opposition here said that what we should do instead of rationing is to educate our children in school about, how they should eat less meat because of whatever. Okay, so now the proposition's rebuttal speaker comes on and he says, What a wonderful idea. Brilliant. Yes, we agree. Let's ration meat and have better education of our children in school so that they understand why we need to ration. So that's a brilliant idea, and we welcome the opposition's agreement. And so now the opposition is cooked. So you've got to make sure that it is a real alternative, that it cannot be combined with whatever the proposition is putting forward. So avoid permutation. Now, the even if argument is a good one also. Now, we had a debate in our London club, and some of you from the wonderful London debaters may remember it. I think it was early last year when Elon Musk was very, very active on Twitter or X as it's called now. And so we had the following motion. This House regrets Elon Musk's purchase of Twitter. Now, one of the points that the proposition brought as a reason for regretting his purchase was that, look at the number of users. It's down, revenue down, advertisement, profits all down, they said. Now, thankfully, I was on the opposition and I had a very good team. So we had done our research and we had seen exactly the same figures and we had thought about it in advance. What if they say that? What can we do? Because it's true, we can't deny the fact. That's when you can use the even if approach. So even if all that is true, we asked the audience, how many in here has shares in X? Put your hands up. Okay. And nobody put their hands up because nobody had shares in X. So then why do we care? So what? What do we care? That Musk is not going to be quite as wealthy as he might have. It's not like he's short of a bob or two, as we say over here. So essentially, even if it's true, it's not necessarily a reason. So this is basically when the warrant is weak. It doesn't compel you. The fact that the value of X's shares go down, that is not something that compels you to regret Elon Musk's purchase. Now, they had other reasons that were better and stronger. So, they gave us a run for our money. It was a good debate. But this particular point, I thought it was a weak one because the warrant was weak. It didn't compel people to vote in favor of regretting it because they had no reason for it. So listen out for when people come up with reasons for why you should support a motion and think about, well, but even if that's true, is it really a reason to support the motion? And the best case scenario is when you identify this already in preparation, of course, and then you on the night, you have it as one of your potential points that you can use in reply to the proposition. And then we have the flipping of the warrant, not flipping the pancake as we did earlier this week, but the flipping of the warrant. So this is when the warrant actually is strong and you can't really deny the warrant. Say, for example, the proposition is arguing for a particular increase in income tax, and this is so that we can pay for better schools, better school equipment, teaching materials, whatever, which is desperately needed, say in our school district. Okay, obviously more income would enable us to buy new teaching resources. And here, if you set it up, if we want better teaching equipment and if increasing taxes will increase the income, then we should support. Now, the problem here is that how do they know for sure that the money will flow in, that a higher tax will necessarily give you more money? That can be questioned. So here you are sort of going for that. Is it really true? Can it be demonstrated to be true? Can they prove that will happen? And then you can say that, well, it might be that a higher tax will actually drive away wealth creators. The high earners will move to and over in your reality there in America, it's quite easy. You can move to a state. It's not as dramatic here in Europe. Obviously, moving to another country is a bit more difficult, but people are still doing it. So it's a very real possibility. And therefore, if you support this warrant that we want more money for educational purposes or for whatever purpose, well, then we should, and this is where you flip around the one, you say, that means we should oppose the motion. We want more money, then we must oppose the motion, because the motion will actually lead to the opposite result. So whenever you can identify that actually it's not as straightforward as the proposition said, that actually you can take the very same reason and you can agree with all of them. Yes, we want more money. Yes, we want more equipment, better equipment. But that means we must oppose the motion. And then you flip it around. So that's a nice one. I mean, there are more things you can question here as well. You can also use the even if argument in this case by saying that even if it were to lead to more money coming in, how do we know for sure that politicians would prioritize teaching equipment? Unless you earmarked it, of course, which you can do, but that depends again on what the proposition said. Okay, so those are the three sort of processes that or approaches to opposition that I find really useful. Now, I think we have just a few minutes, and I'll say quickly what the petal approach is, because I didn't include the slide here now, so I'll just explain quickly that it's an acronym. So PETAL. So P stands for is it practical? So again, that goes a little bit together with what we've talked about already. Like, will this really work? Like in the flipping of the warrant, you're also sort of actually questioning the practicality in the question of rationing meat. There are lots of things you can say about how will this work in practice? How will we police it? What about people who keep chickens in their backyard? So is it really practical? And the E is whether it's ethical. So that's to do with how it connects to people's values. Is it really true in terms of how people feel about it and how it connects to the general morality of our society? Like with the meat example, a lot of people would say that goes against fundamental liberties, individual freedom. If people want to eat meat, they must be free to do that, as long as they're not harming anybody else. T is to do with has it been tried before? So then you look at, the last time we had rationing was, in Europe during the war. I don't know if in America it's ever been tried. So it's not really something that free countries and then communist countries did it, so this is not something for free countries. So you look at where has it been tried before. The A, funnily enough, stands for alternatives. So that points to the alternative scheme approach. And finally, you are also looking for any logical flaws. So again, that's to do with how strong is the warrant? Does it follow logically? Are there any logical fallacies used, like slippery slope arguments or anything else like that? So that's the petal approach. But as I said, it's Sean gave me permission to present it in the book, so I'm very grateful to him for that. So you can read more about it in that if you want to. Right. So Doug asked me to also just say a few words about the book, and it's as I said, it's written based on all the experiences and stuff that I've had, both from my days with politics and studying, and then from all the stuff I've learned in the last few years. And I've learned a lot from my fellow debaters also at the club, and people like Paul Carroll, and also Lo is here tonight. I've worked with many times, and certainly learned a lot from that. So that's all in the book. A few more examples and a bit more in depth, a bit more about research as well. So that's essentially the main part of the presentation.